And this session was recorded live at HT360 2026. Let's dive in. Hello, and you are joining us live from the HT360 Hospitality Leaders Forum, Design Meets Experience, Rethinking Hospitality Spaces with Technology. In this episode, we're going to be exploring how hospitality spaces are being reshaped and reframed as a result of technology, digitalisation, and staffing challenges to elevate guest experience while improving commercial performance. In this session, you'll learn how technology is forcing a rethink to the approach to interiors, architecture, and design of public spaces to maximise revenue in F&B and multi-use areas while creating environments guests genuinely want to spend time in. I'm your host, Ryan Haynes, and we're going to be joined by Scot Turner from Auden Hospitality, Alessandra Leoni from Focus on Hospitality by Focus Group, Paul Wells from Studio Moren, and Prem Jethwa-Odedra from Biteluxe, looking at real-world insights on how space planning, interior design, and smart technology come together to unlock value, optimize operations, and future-proof hospitality businesses.
Hoteliers Voice, exploring opportunity in hospitality with Ryan Haynes. Hear from the people making a difference. From revenue to operations, marketing to digitalisation, learn the thinking behind their decisions.
So first up, it's been an interesting journey over the last 6 months as we go around the UK as part of the hospitality roundtable discussions, speaking to hoteliers and hospitality professionals about how they're utilising their hotel and really adapting and evolving for the future. How the role for staff and effective operations and how we earn additional revenue and the role of technology throughout. Now, Paul, you've been joining me particularly first on that journey across the hotels in the South Coast and in Northampton. And at Studio Moren, you really focus on the physical asset of the building.
We're architects and interior designers. We've been around for about 35 years working in the hospitality sector. We've done a number of hotels across London, like the One Hotel in Mayfair, the Hyatt, down in Nine Elms that we opened last year at Nine Elms. So we really specialise in this sector, and actually the roadshows have been really interesting in exposing us to a new audience of independent hoteliers and understanding the challenges that they face rather than working with the big brands, which is our mainstay.
Now, space is adapting, isn't it? How you're utilising spaces. What are the sort of conversations that you're having to have at the moment in really designing the practical utilization of a hospitality space today?
So I think the one thing we're finding across the board is that space is a luxury, and it's not something we can just take for granted. And so every space within a hotel has to have an operational meaning, or it has to add value either through revenue or through guest experience. And a lot of the conversations we're having are about how space, particularly front of house spaces, can be flexible and how they seamlessly can move from maybe a breakfast service into a more of a social space or a co-working space, and then move into events and then reposition themselves for evening meals or lunchtime meals as well. So actually that seamless transition between different uses is essential to how we design properties, and obviously it adds value through creating a revenue income in a space that may otherwise become unused. So we're seeing it in lobby spaces, for example. Traditionally, big lobby spaces, big hard reception desk, and really just a waiting space. They're transitioning completely into more of a flexible, usable space throughout the entire day.
And I guess that's across all hospitality businesses as well. You can't just have a lobby that's just redundant. It actually has to deliver an experience and also potentially be revenue generating.
Yeah, so we work in hotels all the way from lifestyle to luxury. And even at the luxury end, space is obviously part of that luxurious experience, but it still has to have a use. And actually that the technology infrastructure that helps drive that usability is essential to how we design those spaces, just as much as the right temperature, the right lighting, the right environment, aesthetically. It all comes together to create an operational space.
There are so many different aspects of technology today when it comes to the physical space. As you've just sort of mentioned, it's not just the lighting and the sound system, but it's also that digital and IT infrastructure. What are those conversations and how do you look at that from the development and evolution of preparing the space to make sure that you have the right infrastructure and the right conversations with the right people at the right time before you sort of plow ahead and build the building?
Yeah, so as you correctly say, technology is just as essential to the design now as an MEP strategy. We work a lot with repositioning existing assets, where obviously we're more limited on space. So it's essential to understand what infrastructure needs to go in at the very early stage so we can design around that so that it doesn't come in later and we suddenly have to panic about putting a load of cabling through a ceiling void that doesn't exist and we have to lower ceilings. We need to understand that early on. Obviously, when we're working with a new build, we also equally need to understand it because we might have the ability to raise a floor slab to give us that space on the underside and create ceiling voids and spaces that really work from aesthetic value.
That's fascinating because, as you say, you're either lifting floors or you're lowering ceilings. That has a massive impact on that aesthetic, but also the feel of the space, and what you're trying to achieve and convey at the same time. So I guess there has to be some really quite delicate and educational conversations involved throughout the team and the partners that are involved in that.
Yeah, so I think traditionally we'd have had MEP and structures involved early on and technology might have fed in a little bit later. But I think nowadays technology has to be part of the forefront of those discussions. If you have patchy Wi-Fi, doesn't matter how beautiful your space is, nobody's going to use it. So it needs to be built in from the off. And like you say, that personalization of lighting or of heat control and AV and being able to manage that system, not just front of house, also in the guest rooms, that's essential to how people now move around and work flexibly.
Thank you, Paul. So moving to Alessandra Leoni from Focus for Hospitality. Now, you work really in and around the IT infrastructure, but your background is hotelling. So you really understand the need to adapt spaces, both for accommodation purposes for guests, but also to provide that hospitality service. When it comes to your thinking around IT infrastructure, what are some of the core pitfalls that some businesses can make if they don't think it through?
Well, like you said, Ryan, I've been around for many years and I have refurbished quite a number of hotels in my career, and the evolution of technology and how it's consumed by the guests and by the teams has drastically changed over the past few years. So more so now, it's so important to get in the ground and at the very beginning where a project begins with the designers to address what the strategy is for that vision and what type of experience and product we want to deliver to the guests, and how that product is being consumed through the journey, and how technology plays a part in it to allow the guest to continue in his choices. So it's all about, we can have a strategy, but then it's how do we address the guest expectation and how the guest wants to consume that product. It can be through the restaurant and by simply looking at a physical menu, or the guest wants to prefer a QR codes. So it's about embedding the technology within the design that allows the guest to continue to consume your services and go through your brand by choice.
I mean, design and aesthetics, those trends don't change as often as we've seen technology change. So how do you actually go, okay, where are we going to be in 3-5 years' time without having to go through a full refurbishment or rip out? How do you approach that?
Well, scalability and future proofing is definitely always on our mind when we propose technology through the business. We want to understand, when we're talking to owners, operators, designer, architects, we want to understand how the space can change in the future so we can put forward solutions that will fit within that space without hindering the aesthetic design or the guest journey through the space. So technology is evolving a lot faster than it was years ago. So we need to be prepared to change those solutions. On the positive side, technology is costing a lot less, and it's a lot more scalable when it's defined and the strategy is defined early on. and so that we can make that change as to the evolution of the guest expectation, the company strategy, etc. So
now, how do you get that balance right, or how do you look at it from a hidden technology versus a visible tech? Because there's the digital devices, there is the Wi-Fi and connectivity, but then you've got a lot of infrastructure that sits behind the scenes in order just to run a business, any business, let alone hospitality. So within that environment, such a large physical asset, how do you look at the role that those physical and hidden technologies play?
well, the essential technology needs to be invisible. It cannot create friction. It should only enable the operational activity of the business as well as support the teams to deliver those guest experience, and they are anticipated by the brand and by the guest. So ensuring that technology is fit for purpose, that is resilient for future proof and change, depending on how technology will move in the future, is essential. But really connecting and speaking to all the stakeholders that are involved within the operation.
But in order for a hospitality to be successful, it has to deliver a service. What are those thought processes you need to go through when you're speaking to your clients about the utilization or reutilization of an existing asset?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because we're also operators of restaurants as well. So I can come at this from what we look for in tech as much as how we consult. I think the two main things for me when it comes to tech as an operator, the first of all, it has to reduce friction, whoever that's for, whether it's for the guest or whether it's for the member of staff that's going to be using it or using the space. It needs to be able to take something away that makes life difficult or add to the experience. And then the other one then needs to be, how can it put people back in front of guests? So we've got into this culture where we're in a lot of reporting, we're looking at a lot of data, things are coming from all these different tech platforms that do all these different things. How do we enable people to get back onto the floor, and how does tech enable us to be able to do that? Because what we're certainly seeing, margins are getting so much tighter now and they're about to get worse. How can we use tech to put people where it counts, which is getting cash in tills?
Because I think I read an interesting article a few months ago, was it Itsu is reducing the number of self-service kiosks because that's had a detrimental impact on that experience for guests or customers. So there really has to be a fine balance here as to what you stand for as a brand and what your guests and customers are actually expecting.
I mean, hospitality is the commodity, right? That's what's going to put businesses at the forefront is, do you go to a place and do you have connection and do you see a big smile and do you get that face-to-face chat? I think that's where things like kiosks, I have a similar example to that. We ran a vegan brand and we had 11 restaurants in Manhattan in a previous life. And we had the Rockefeller Center. It was doing $150,000 a week. We thought we were going to make a big stir by putting kiosks in. And actually what we found is about 10% of people did the kiosks and everyone was quite happy to just stand in the queue. And when we were talking to guests, they were like, well, we actually quite enjoy this little bit where we get to talk to each other while we're stood in the queue. So actually it's quite nice for this, because the minute we go back to our desks, we end up doing emails and back in front. And actually for the user, it wasn't what they wanted. So I think, again, it's back to that bit of anytime you look at a concept, anytime you look at a space, who's going to use it? Why are they using it? What do they want to get out of it? And what tech can fit into that jigsaw that can make life easier, better, less friction, bigger, better experience?
Okay, so let's get on to the actual tech then, that stack or the different application systems, platforms, whatever you want to call them, that's actually going to work in that environment, because we could be inundated with a plethora of options. But what are, would you say, the essentials? And then what are the ones that you think, okay, these are ones to look out for and think about for the future?
Well, you told me we only have 4 minutes, so that's to narrow it down. I had to narrow it down to the top 3 because we don't have long enough to talk about all the different tech that we can use nowadays. But I think the ones that can move the needle, if you're in a full service restaurant, getting the right reservation system that can do the right things makes a massive difference. And we're not here to talk about individual platforms, but make sure that it's very user friendly. Make sure that you can really give the user an experience. And not only that, but it'll help upsell or add further things to it. So everyone's been on the restaurants where you go to put in your time slot and it comes up saying not available, but the next available one is Tuesday at 3:00, or why don't you try one of our other properties? That element of cross-sell is really important, but it's the way you get the back end out of it. And what we're seeing now is how you can get your EPOS into your reservation system to really start drilling down on guests and guest behavior. Helps the marketing guys, and importantly, to start looking at email marketing and comms to be able to start targeting the right things to the right people, which engages them a lot more. But when those guests start coming back to the restaurant, that's when you can bring that hospitality into play, and you can start talking about last time you visited, you ordered this bottle of red wine. Would you like it again? Welcome back, Mr. Turner. Whatever it might be, how you can add that hospitality and personalization into it is super key. So when you're looking at that EPOS to reservation system integration, make sure it's two-way. Don't have the EPOS just going into the reservation system, having it go back, because when the waiter goes and clicks on the table, if that can bring up guest preferences and allergens and things like that, it just makes it a much more seamless way of doing things. That would be the first. The second one is a learning management system, right? I've opened lots of restaurants. I think this one we're doing now, Fox Hills out in Surrey, I think is number 50. And every single time, the biggest thing that can impact isn't the builders handing over late. It isn't not having your deliveries. It's whether you can get the team to execute what you want them to do. And when it goes into a live operation, how you get those people to keep learning, how you get new people to understand the brand is so difficult. There's not training departments very, very often anymore. People are stretched on time. And if you can put it into their hands, what you want them to learn is incredibly powerful. And what we're seeing at the minute is video first is the one that engages people the most. So don't ignore those learning management systems that are built for the generation that are learning today, and how you can get them to engage. That's number 2. Number 3, I promised 3. The third one is an inventory and purchasing system. The biggest commodity within F&B after labour is food. You need to make sure it's being controlled, and there's ways to do that. AI is coming into that quite a bit now in terms of being able to help chefs forecast ordering, being able to analyse things properly, being able to do menu engineering properly. We're in fine margins. So if your payroll system's helping you on payroll, find the system that can help you with that margin on food as well. That'd be my 3 go-tos.
Now, I mean, what about actual on-site? Because a lot of the hospitality companies now are looking towards the devices, tablets, or some other way of being able to, rather than pen and paper. I guess that's also helpful to be able to feed into both the EPOS as well as the inventory systems, isn't it, to be able to automatically update?
Yeah, I mean, there's in one of our restaurants, I'm a pen and paper guy. I still find it difficult. One of my tests on handheld devices is if a user can use it without looking down and they can keep looking at the guest. Because if you can't have that eye-to-eye contact that you can have when you're taking notes, I just think you're losing that connection. That's always my biggest bit in terms of like how this scrolls through and try and find. I just think it's a bit messy, but it can help. There's at Fox Hills where we're working now. We did a cafe with them. It goes from 60 covers in the winter to 300 in the summer. The way they had lots of friction in kitchen with guest wait times, with queues. A QR code sitting around the extra beds that came out in summer had a massive impact on how that then brings the revenue through, how it helps guest experience, how it helps pace orders into the kitchen. And within putting that in, the first year was 20% up on previous year. The last summer that just went was 20% up. So it's 40% up in total. We reduced different bits of friction, but one of the main things we did was made it easier for guests to order. So it's not for every business and it's not for every single venue, but where you can find that way to get some of that in, pay at table at the end of meals. In our restaurant in St. Christopher's Place, we do 300 covers a day. When we put pay at table in, we managed to get an extra sitting in. Into the SIP because we were just finding table turns were much quicker than having to wait for bills and things. So I think using QR codes to your advantage in the right place, in the right setting, can have a massive impact on revenue and make teams' lives easier.
Now, if you want more of Scott Turner, you can do in his podcast, Hospitality Huddles. We'll come back to you in just a moment, Scott, but now move over to Prem Jethwa-Odedra from Biteluxe. Now, we've gone from the journey throughout the physical space and in real worlds, but let's look at the digital experience, because there's ways in which now technology is providing a deeper connection to guests and customers that is beyond the actual space of the hospitality business. Tell us a bit more about sort of like Biteluxe and how you connect hospitality businesses with guests.
Yeah, absolutely. So to date, obviously, you said from the conversation, we've been really focused on the physical space, right? But representing that physical space digitally is like a hard challenge. And case study, Queen and Chester, 218 rooms, 4-star hotel. They had a fantastic F&B space. They spent about £5 million in 2024 refurbishing their space. Last year, they had an incremental F&B revenue target of £1 million. And the challenge they had was guests were turning up at the hotel, seeing the restaurant, walking straight out the front door, and then going to dine at the 100 restaurants which were on their doorstep. And part of the reason why was because historically, they'd really focused on leveraging their email campaigns. And the email campaign just wasn't cutting it anymore. So their open rates were decreasing year on year. Their conversion rates were decreasing year on year. So they engaged with us. And what we basically did was we built an AI called Amanda. And Amanda was tasked with reaching out to every guest during pre-arrival via WhatsApp. And just to start a conversation with them, finding out the kind of experience that they wanted to have at the hotel. And then off the back of that, contextually offering them a table. So rather than just saying, hey, look, do you want to book a table? It was along the lines of, oh, fantastic, congratulations. Think for your anniversary. We'd like to book an anniversary table dinner with us whilst you're here. And that proved to be wildly successful. They literally doubled their seat to diner ratio year on year.
I mean, these experiences, these digital experiences, you've got to be careful. You've got to be able to architect it in a way that's actually going to add real value. So there's one thing delivering a message via WhatsApp, but there's another thing intruding on someone's inbox. So how do you work to make sure that you're actually providing that value as and when guests are arriving at a venue?
Yeah, sure. So when you're starting a conversation via for WhatsApp with a guest, and you're moving away from broadcasting and sending these static messages out that aren't really personalized, you've got the opportunity to find out why these guests are staying, and then offering them contextual upsells, how I mentioned before. And that's relatively easy to do with a hotel because a guest will book a room at a hotel, and then we connect it to the PMS system, and you can get their contact details. You can send them a WhatsApp message. That's kind of easy. When you're talking about F&B spaces where you get a lot of walk-ins, you obviously don't have that connection beforehand. So it's about taking more of a holistic approach. There's your Wi-Fi data capture, as mentioned before, where you get to capture their email details and their phone details if they're connecting to a public Wi-Fi hotspot. But not everyone necessarily does that. A lot of us are on unlimited data plans. And when you're dealing with those segments, it's about using things like QR codes. So as well as having the Wi-Fi capture, why not give a QR code to your front of house staff? So before that diner is leaving the restaurant, you're capturing their details and asking them to join, let's say, a VIP supper club, for instance. It's about having a cohesive 360 approach to data capture.
I mean, Queen of Chester is a really fascinating one. You didn't want people leaving the building to go and hunt down other restaurants. You wanted to keep them there. You wanted to give them visibility in the offering within that F&B venue. What other ways in which digital experiences through the likes of WhatsApp is helping earn additional revenue throughout a business?
So with WhatsApp, you've got your standard messages that you can send, text, PDF menus, images. With images, as a consumer, when you're looking for a hotel or a restaurant and you're browsing through booking.com and you're browsing for OpenTable and you've seen like 50 hotel pictures, right? 50 restaurant images, they kind of blur into one, and you lose the ability have a reduced ability to make a decision. And the beauty of WhatsApp and other instant messaging channels is you get to use things like video, right? And with video, it's not just about walking around a restaurant space and taking some shots of the bar. You've got an opportunity to get really personal. So get your sous chef to run through their signature dish and talk about the ingredients that they've used. And it's that kind of content that generates excitement. And it's that excitement which then goes to generate additional upsells.
Now, Scott, I mean, cybersecurity as an operator is obviously a concern for data leakage for your own business, for your own customers, but also the prospect that you've got God knows how many devices on site that could be interfering in some way. What's the thought processes that go through of how you keep on top of that and determining the right partners to work with?
I think this is, it's just part of the questions you have to ask when you're looking at what provider you bring in. And it's having people around that you know and trust that can help you with that. We're operators, right? We're not cybersecurity people and we're not specialists in that. So it's about finding the people who can come in and help and support it. I think one of the other bits then is how you educate the team as well on being careful with guest data, being careful with each other's data, how that all sits with the ecosystem. So we're definitely doing a lot more training, especially with like reception teams or like the restaurant reception teams that are sitting there with guest data. You can obviously hide certain bits from profiles and things, but when it comes to infrastructure, it's about finding the right person who can help. And then day to day, it's just about making sure you've got your I's dotted and your T's crossed, and the team are educated and aware of the risk of things going wrong.
Digital experience, your personal best digital experience that you enjoy. What are they? Can you share any particular personal experience, technology experience in hotel or hospitality? Prem?
That for me, the best hospitality experiences are the ones that they're really thought about the kind of experience they want to deliver and then making sure that the service and technology aligns to that experience.
Alessandra, so many different hospitality experiences you must have had. Which one stands out?
To me, my favorite one is not necessarily what I like best, but is like Prem was saying, each experience, each transaction as a meaning. If I'm just hungry, I just want to eat some food, I'm not really fussed about the menu, that I'm fitting that purpose. But if it's a special occasion, etc., so is the adaptability. Every brand should have a tone of voice and should have a vision for the guest experience that it wants to deliver. And the technology, the spaces should fit within, because nowadays when we look for an experience, we do our own research. We use AI to do our own research to make an itinerary for us. So we have an expectation to receive the delivery that we have researched prior to making the decision for that experience. So that's really important.
Now, Paul, we've gone throughout the guest experience. We've talked about the digital, the technology, operations, but we discovered on this roadshow, it was also the staff, is having a space for the staff. How do you think of staff spaces, but also what a staff member needs on their break, on their time out?
So a lot of the hotels we work on in London have very poor staff facilities. And what we're seeing is that if you have poor staff facilities, you don't have staff retention, which means when your guest experience suffers, because the next time you go in, you've got different people. So one of the things of working in hospitality is we go back to our projects all the time. We do show rounds, we have coffees, we sit in them, it's great. Some of our hotels, we go back, you see the same people on reception every time. They recognize you, they welcome you, and that's a great experience. Other hotels where we know that we've been pushed for room numbers over back of house spaces, you see different people every time and they don't know who you are. And it's completely different experience for the guest, and also it's a problem for the hotel. So in terms of guest experience, back of house and staff experience, daylight, it seems like a basic, but in London it doesn't always happen.
It doesn't involve tech, that's cheap.
That's a very easy one to solve. But I think they need to have a space where they feel they can relax, where they can go on their devices, they can step away from their operational day, and in a space that's quiet and a bit of an escape. And it's not a shoehorned into a corner in the basement.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank today Scott Turner from Auden Hospitality, Alessandra Leoni from Focus on Hospitality, looking at the IT infrastructure and IT support across here in the UK, Prem Jethwa-Odedra from Biteluxe for digital experiences through WhatsApp, and Paul Wells from Studio Moren, looking at architecture and interior design within hospitality spaces. I've been your host, Ryan Haynes from Hoteliers Voice. Thanks ever so much for listening. See you.